Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I introduce my guest, I do want to remind everybody that a bunch of links are up above in the description. So the best way how to support me and my guest is by clicking those links. Buy me a coffee. Obviously, check out New Wave Pro Wrestling. And so welcome to the show, Earl Johnson.
Earl Joseph.
Joseph. Oh, wow. I am so nervous, and I am the worst at this, clearly.
No,
I am
don't
getting
worry.
ahead of myself by far. It's Earl Joseph. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm very excited and slightly nervous as it's now been determined. And I'm going to quietly walk myself into a corner. But there's a lot I want to talk about. And I think the best place to start is, how did New Wave Pro Wrestling start? Because it is a relatively new promotion. It's about 8-9 years old, I believe, and sort of 2013, 2012 era.
That's right. Yes, the company started well before I ever even dreamed of moving to the United States. It had been going in the town or the city of Terre Haute in Indiana, which is just on the western part of the state, and they had sort of carved out a little niche of their own with putting on really good regular wrestling shows, using regular guys, and becoming like a byword for good wrestling in the area. Very community oriented as well. I didn't join the company myself until January of 2020, actually. And I had 3 shows before COVID became an issue and closed everything down. And since July of 2020, the company has been revamped almost totally. We have the series Higher Ground on IWTV, and we've had a number of huge super shows, I guess you can call them, since then as well. And we have one coming up on July 31st, Mob Rules, at the Terre Haute National Guard Armory. But in terms of New Wave Pro's history, they are one of the mainstays of Indiana wrestling. They have been established for a while. They are a very familiar name, and honestly, they're one of those companies where a lot of people pass through. Mance Warner, for example, had one of his first ever matches at New Wave Pro. So it's one of those places that people come and cut their teeth, and that's a trend that still happens today. You know, we've got currently right now we have the stars of tomorrow, I would say, in some cases.
And obviously, I want to get into all of that, and there's a whole bunch of history as well. And obviously, 2013, this company started off very much slow, and then it's just grown and grown and grown and grown. And so I am curious, because I think you're from the UK, as you stated. And how did you even come to the States and then get involved in wrestling? Because this is sort of one of those weird stories. If you don't mind me stating, you don't seem like the guy that I would imagine to wind up in Indiana and be part of this company and really help to be bringing it forward, because 2020 obviously fucked up a lot of shit.
Yeah, I moved here I'm based in Indianapolis, so I moved here in November 2018, and I did that because I had a marriage visa. I'd met someone who lived in Indianapolis, and we were going back and forth, and then I decided to completely upend, my entire life. Despite being a wrestling fan for essentially all of my life, I'm in my mid-30s now, and I've enjoyed wrestling for 30 years or so. I hadn't actually really dabbled in it before back in England. I'd always pursued writing and music and stuff, but it just so happened that when I first moved to the country, just around the corner from me was a training school. And I fell into that, started training to be an actual wrestler, which I turned out to be really crap at. And I, because of my voice and because I have plenty of acting experience, stage television, it just made sense for me to try and be a ring announcer and a commentator. And things went out, things completely spiraled from there. I sort of quickly established myself and became freelance in January of 2020, and very quickly was picked up by a number of other companies, one of them being New Wave. And with the pandemic, I sort of moved into a promoter and booker role. So things happened very, very quickly, actually.
And so let's talk about that, because this is super interesting, because I don't think people understand how important commentary is, how important a ring announcer is. You know, obviously introducing somebody, you know, taking care of sponsorships, making sure sponsorships are announced, making sure that, you know, the crowd is pumped up, you know, making sure that, you know, the wrestler knows when to come out, you know, obviously all that stuff. And then obviously doing commentary as well and calling the match,
Hmm.
because I watch a lot on IWTV. And, you know, sometimes I miss things in a match and I don't know every hold, I don't know everything that's going on, and things can get chaotic. So what was that like? Because that's how you sort of first came in to it. Obviously you had a little bit of the wrestling training background, but then obviously what was that like? Because coming in, and then we're going to talk about booking and booking New Wave and all that stuff, because doing it the way you did it probably gives you more insight than booking first and then doing it the other way.
Yeah, in terms of what you said about announcing and commentary, um, you know, I don't think enough people make sure that an announcer is part, or a commentator is part of the show, especially at independent level. There are plenty of companies who treat it as a second thought, if a thought at all. Sometimes the announcer or the commentators are friends of people who work for the company that's putting on the show, and they might not be um, either up to the task, or they might not be prepared for what's actually going to come. I am, you know, I'll say the truth. I'm an egotist, right? You have to be. You have to be to do this kind of thing. And so I understand that being a ring announcer is a part of the show. It's a part of the performance. Yeah, I'm not taking bumps. I'm not stripped to the waist. I'm not bleeding, but I am the bridge between the audience and the show itself. Like you say, it's important to introduce people. It's important to denote who the sponsors are. And it's important that the crowd has somebody that they can relate to, in terms of, because there's always a distance, or there should be, frankly, a distance between audience and wrestler, as much as there is a distance between you and what you see on your television screen. And so the announcer is like the narrator, if you will, the narrator of a story, which is why when I announce and after matches, I will sometimes fill in the gaps in the story. And I will say, oh, you saw that what Mr. X did here to Mr. Y. What does that mean for the future? You'll have to come back next week and find out. Similar with commentary, you are a storyteller. And it's not just a case of saying, oh, nice arm drag, headlock takedown. Okay, he's worked him back up into the rope, shoulder tackle, because great, they can see that. They know exactly what's going on. You need to be able to tell the story and let people know as to what's really happening, what's in the mind of these wrestlers, what's in the mind of these athletes. My own technique, and this isn't very helpful, but I'll tell you it anyway. My own technique when I commentate is to simply just let go, just like, it's the only time my mind is clear, honestly, because I'm watching action happen and I follow it, and I let my mouth run. I switch my brain off and just go all in. And my style, if I dare say so, is kind of like Joey Styles, that kind of motor mouth thing. I do a lot of solo commentary, particularly with Flophouse Wrestling and some other companies. So I have free reign, and as you can tell, I like to talk a lot, and I'm good with a quip and a line, so it helps. But it's about having confidence as well. If you go in there and you're worried that people are going to criticize your work, or you're not going to call enough moves, or you're not going to do it right, then you're gonna lose. You have to go in there. There's a cliche, dance like nobody's watching. Well, commentate like nobody's listening, honestly, because that's what you have to do.
So yeah, to even go further into that, because obviously one of the first things that starts out a show is the ring announcer, and it can make or break a show. And I know it sounds crazy, but when a ring announcer, and obviously everybody knows Rich Palladino from Beyond, he's sort of, I guess, the standard for a lot of people. And when he starts out a show, I know I'm at that show. And if you're ring announcing and you're all pumped up and exciting, that's going to set the trend of the show. And then also your facial expressions can be very important as well, where if there's a heel that comes out and cuts you off in the middle of his entrance or in the middle of who you're announcing, obviously that also sets the trend, because you're part of it. And so it is very important. I think people don't understand that all those little tiny things add to the entire, because I view wrestling almost as a universe type mentality. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is very important to understand that even commentary, you could hear when a commentator is happy and thrilled and excited to be there, and you could hear when they're mortified. You could hear, and it is so important, whether that's you acting or you're feeling that way, it's massively important. And so obviously when you do things like that, I mean, it makes or breaks the show.
Absolutely, yeah. What's a car without an engine, or what's a car without four wheels and a body and seats? Everything is worth its weight in gold. It's a wrestling show is the sum of its parts, and you can have the most talented wrestlers in the world, but if the commentary is shit, and I hope I can swear, then then everything suffers. If you have a great commentator but shit wrestlers, then guess what? It's going to suffer. I think now we're coming into a time in independent wrestling where there is a lot more focus on commentators, and you're getting a more professional breed of independent commentators. And I think that's twofold. One, because there's a lot more work out there, and there's many more chances to get yourself seen and heard because of the internet. But conversely, there is also more room to criticize commentators now, because if you're watching a show and you're streaming live on IWTV and the commentator isn't to your liking, and if you're like this, and if you're this type of person, you can go on Twitter and you can say, I don't like this commentator, he's crap. And then all of a sudden, other people jump in. So I think more and more people are more aware of themselves and the things they say. There's also issues with language. People want to be represented with in different ways these days. They want to be addressed and known with different nomenclature, and so people really have to do their research, and they have to do notes, and they have to speak to the talent before they go on air, whether it be recorded or live. And so the trickle down effect of all of that is a more professional approach from everybody. Nowadays, bad commentators stick out like a sore thumb, and there is a nice peak being reached, I think, and commentators are in themselves becoming parts of the show and personalities, not to everyone else's detriment, but the good ones are being recognized. So I think, in this sort of age of the social media, of live streaming, where it's not just about the wrestlers and the results, more and more people are becoming aware of the components of an entire wrestling show and what you can do to make it as good as possible for your audience.
And to even go further, because a lot of shows, I used to live in DC, and I used to go to a bunch of shows in DC, and the most the show ever had was 500 people, not because there weren't empty seats, but that's all that where they were going could hold, but there was a lot more people watching live on streaming services. And so obviously when you're commentating, the commentators aren't necessarily there for the 500 people who are watching. They're there for the much larger audience. And then also, even going further, obviously all throughout 2020, we've had pretty much no attendance shows. And so almost commentators have been the connection between fans and sort of being a regular person. I think that's also something that has affected and has sort of spun growth at a commentary as well, because now it is an intricate part of the show. And it is important because when I'm hearing a commentator and then they do a quick shot of them and they look exactly like me, I'm not a jacked guy, I'm not a jacked girl, I don't look like a wrestler. But my commentator who's speaking to me looks more like you, looks more like me, and they're almost the connection, much like the ring announcer. And so how do you feel that 2020 and COVID affected that? Because I feel that's really where a lot of this is going as well. And also this idea of cinematic matches and almost pre-taped as well affects things.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, to be honest, with the notion of the commentator.
Oh no. Oh no.
Hello?
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're back. Thank God. 5 seconds.
Yeah, okay,
That's
yeah,
all.
that's So yeah, I was saying that you were right in what you said about announcers and commentators in the no fans era. Speaking as someone who booked shows and commentated on shows and ringing out shows during that whole very strange period, independent wrestling's own Thunderdome era, if you will, I could say that it allowed for a lot more flexibility in terms of creativity and ingenuity. Suddenly, we weren't able to test out wrestlers, or ideas or angles or anything without a crowd reaction, and that can allow for an echo chamber to be created where you can just plow on ahead without fan feedback and go, God, this is great. What we're doing is really good. And then when you finally hit the fans again, no one likes it. But it comes back to what I was saying again about social media feedback and live streaming, where fans were still engaged with products, with companies, with shows and angles and wrestlers and all the personalities involved, and were able to give up to the minute reactions. And I went through a number of no crowd shows with different companies, and it was a learning process. It was tough. It was really, really tough. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. It was the first couple of times did it. It was really strange. It was very eerie. I think I did my first no fans show around November or December, and these things started dragging on to about 6 or 7 hours because there was no crowd to satisfy. So you could just you could finish a match and cut and then go, all right, everyone take a break and whatever, and then as time went on, you started filtering that out and go, no, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not spending 10 hours a day doing this. But I think, and I want to be careful how I say this, but overall, wrestling has in the long term, will realize that it has benefited from this era because it has shown strength in unity. It has shown strength in wrestling community, and it's shown the perseverance of people who simply want to put on shows. A lot of these no fan shows are obviously, by their very nature, have little to no budget, right? So all of a sudden, the capital incentive of a wrestler's labor has disappeared in a lot of cases, and a lot of these things were done out of love and out of favors and out of friendship and just simply out of wanting to do it. And I think in a lot of cases it's fostered a lot of new friendships and new partnerships between companies. Certainly in my case, I can speak from personal experience about having stronger bonds with other promoters and other workers and other people involved in the industry as a result of this no fans era. Obviously, it was very terrible, and a lot of companies lost a lot of business. A lot of wrestlers lost a lot of money as well. So I'm not going to sit here and say it was positive overall. I'm just talking about one latent effect will be a growth in the community. And God help us if we do suffer through another crisis collectively again. And I think we may be able to face it head on and be more prepared to deal with it. One effect, if I may just continue the thread, one effect I've seen as a result of the pandemic and a lack of fans is fantastic commercial ingenuity. Speaking from New Wave's perspective, we have done really well with forging corporate sponsorships with partners, be they individuals and fans or local companies, or in some cases like sort of bigger corporations, Patreon and merchandise and special gimmicks to sell. And a lot of other companies have done the same, not just relying on ticket revenue, because that wasn't a concept for 9, 10, 11, 12 months. And it's only just becoming a concept again. But I've seen a lot of companies, too many to list, who have come up with Patreons and who have come up with sponsorships and have leaned on supporters to help them. And it's been good to see. It's good to see business sense rise to the top in times of emergency. And the vast majority of companies have come out of it, not unscathed, obviously, but they've come out of it perhaps better than they thought they would have. And speaking for New Wave, I was worried about how our 2021 would turn out. We did a show called See You at the Crossroads in December 2020. And that was New Wave Pro's first empty arena show. And it was a success creatively. and it helped advance storylines and helped advance a number of wrestlers we were looking to push and to make more prominent. But coming out of it, and even in December, as you'll remember, Andrew, there was a lot of uncertainty still about where we were going, just as a people and as an economy. It still felt very strange. And I was worried about how 2021 was going to go for New Wave, but it's perhaps been our strongest year so far. So as long as you've got the fight and the application and a good support network, and you're willing to work alongside other people and willing to eat shit sometimes, then there is water if God wills it.
And so I kind of want to dive into some of this, because one of the things that's super interesting is that obviously 2020 fucked up a lot of shit. I come from the indie comic world, and a lot of my guests are indie comics, and obviously comics conventions are not happening, and San Diego's still not happening, and it's going to be a whole interesting ball field where all that's going. And some people have done very well, and obviously a lot of people have adapted to figuring out how to survive. Obviously I've adapted in my own personal life, figuring out what to do during this time period. And so what is that like? Because obviously you're now on the promoting side, on the commentary side. I'm sure that if need be, you could step up and ring announce at the same time. But what has that been like? Because obviously building these, I guess, secondary and tertiary, revenue streams for companies and watching them and playing around with them, those aren't going away. They're now going to be a instrumental part, I feel, in wrestling. Having a Patreon, having a Buy Me a Coffee, doing corporate sponsorships, having special shirts to sell, having, special stuff going on. So what is that like? Because that's an evolution in wrestling that probably needed to happen 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's hard work, as you can imagine, extremely hard work. And I'll use a really good example for New Wave Pro. We did that show in December, which had no sponsorship. And then in February, 20th of February of this year, we committed to doing a whole day's worth of tapings. We filmed 3 episodes of our Higher Ground show in one day, not one afternoon, one day, right? From morning until night. And that was all done via sponsorship. We basically sold out. We basically put everything up for sponsorship but the kitchen sink. And even then, I would have asked someone to sponsor the kitchen sink if they'd wanted to. Every wrestler we booked, every referee, our ring crew, the commentators, we had advertising space. We would have live on-air reads. We offered commercial space. We offered turnbuckle pads. We offered canvas. We offered banners. We offered the ring aprons. We just opened everything up, and we got the shows funded completely. We didn't turn a profit. It wasn't about making a profit at that point. We wanted to bring in people who had helped us out during a very dark time in the company's life and everybody's life, frankly. And we wanted to bring those people in and do our best to give them a payday, because quite frankly, we owed a lot of people morally, monetarily, and philosophically. We owed people. And doing that was a huge undertaking. And I'd like to give a shout out while I'm here to New Wave Pro's owner, Michael Guess, who is an absolute workhorse and does so much on the sponsorship and advertising and corporate side of things. The guy is relentless. Honestly, I've never met anyone like him. He is just a battering ram. And it was...
So you can go off of that, and sorry to interrupt, but because the way I view this is that sometimes when I do certain projects, I'm not losing money, but I'm not making money, but I'm building out my brand. And that's what this seems like in a lot of ways, where doing those 3 shows, paying wrestlers, taking care of wrestlers who helped you out during a crisis, and also then just producing shows, because now more people see this stuff. and then that stuff eventually gets onto a streaming service or it gets up onto YouTube, and then it's out there, and then that draws more and more attention for better days, essentially, which I think are coming. And so obviously I think that is super important to take that philosophy, just like any business. I started a business and it's a small side hustle. In my first year, I didn't make any money, but I built out my name. And that's super important, and the idea of goodwill even going forward. And so obviously I think it is super important that companies take care of their wrestlers, especially when the wrestlers have taken care of the company.
Yeah, and wrestling is a business built on reputation. If you take the piss, if you drag people out, if you stall, if you treat people badly, then it's just going to come back and bite you on the arse. That's the simple point of it. With those tapings in February, the end story, the end game of that was we broke even. We paid everybody, and we got 3 episodes of wrestling television made. And as you say, that furthers the branding, that bolsters the company's reputation, and it forges stronger working relationships with people. So it was a win. And if you're in it at this point, as in the point of February 2021, when things were still really up in the air, and you're in it solely for profit, then you're barking up the wrong tree. You've got no hope.
And also, your fellow British man once said that if you're in the middle of hell, you might as well keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. I only had one way of looking, and that was forwards. My shoot job has been shit because of the pandemic. Life was terrible, and I only had one desire, and that was to make, and God help me for having this desire, but it was to make good wrestling shows and good wrestling television. It was my number one focus. It was an obsession. It still is. I am plainly obsessed with doing this, and it's hard work, and it's been even harder than I ever imagined in the last 12 to 15 months, but God help me, I still want more. So.
And then even going further into this, because obviously you came in a promoter in the worst situation ever, I think it's safe to say, into this entire thing. And so what was that like, not knowing sort of in January 2020 that what is this going to look like? What is wrestling going to look like? And then even figuring out how to book, because I would assume some people, obviously statistically, some people got COVID who were wrestling, and also the fan base, there's always a concern about them. And then even what can be done, and even how far people are willing to travel, because, people are from all over. And obviously I think Indiana is Midwest, I want to say, and it's in that sort of, I guess, circuit. But what was that like, trying to figure out how to promote things in wrestling? Because it could be a real headache when traveling is restricted.
Yeah, so a quick brush up on the timeline. When I started with New Wave, I was only a backstage correspondent in January, February, and by March I had been made the on-screen general manager, and then that was our last show before the shutdown. And from March to July, or March to about May, I spent that downtime writing the first episode of what would become Higher Ground. I pitched it to the company, and they liked it. And there were less restrictions around last summer, as far as I remember. It seems like a lifetime ago, but
it seems like 10 years ago, right?
I know. It's
like a month ago seems like 10 years ago, because everything seems the same, right? Like 3 weeks ago, I'll tell a quick story to get my point across. I had ice cream last week. I felt like I had that ice cream like 4 months ago. That's how bad this is. So I completely understand.
Yeah. So we planned the first episode of Higher Ground for July 26th of last year, obviously, and it was a real hit and hope. Obviously, we were right. We were only 4 months in to the pandemic itself, since everything had shut down anyway, since the real beginning of it, and its social effects. And it was more, you know, and God help me, I don't want to sound like, you know, whatever, Mr. Savior or whatever. You know, our aim, honestly, at first was to just put on a show and make people happy, because everyone was having a real crap time, and we wanted to give people something familiar, and something that they could hold on to and could enjoy. And the show was such a success, the first show, even with the restrictions. You know, we had a capacity of 100 in the building we had in Terre Haute, the New Wave Pro training facility. And just based on the success of that, we just kind of went crazy and went, oh, okay, fuck this, let's do more and more. So, you know, 2 weeks later we had Higher Ground 2, then another 2 weeks after that we had Higher Ground 3, and then another 3 weeks after that we had New Beginnings. Like, we just couldn't stop ourselves, because like the momentum was so high. And to be honest, and this is a real weird thing to think about, God bless Indiana for being so lax with its attitudes towards people's well-being. But at one time, particularly in July and August, we were genuinely one of the only companies running regularly in the United States. And that's a really, really bizarre thing to think about. Not just the Midwest, but the United States as a whole. And as a result, we became quite sort of popular on IWTV.
And so to talk about that, because obviously certain companies have popped up. You know, Limitless Wrestling has popped up. And I got just recently introduced to Limitless Wrestling because of COVID. You know, and I was big into St. Louis Anarchy, and I was big into some other things, and those weren't around. And this is going to sound fucked up. And I know exactly every wrestling fan, I completely get how this is going to sound, but all of a sudden, companies that were able to run, there were a bunch of other companies that were running regularly that couldn't do it. And so that obviously got a lot of eyes on New Wave. And Limitless got a lot of waves at the same time and eyes on it and all sorts of stuff. So what is that like? Because it's kind of, you know, I don't want to say COVID was a capitalistic opportunity, but if you're able to run when other people can't, you know, and people want wrestling, you know, and you're putting on a good product, you're obviously building new fans.
I mean, it was tricky. Where we're going, a capitalistic opportunity. Honestly, it depends what way you want to look at it. We didn't do it for that reason as such, but we sort of. It was only when the first.
We could pick a better reason. We wanted to give wrestlers work. Let's go with that.
Yeah, well, we did. We wanted to give wrestlers work, and we wanted to give our local audience. New Wave Pro is a very local oriented company. You know, it's very community based. It's very entrenched part of the Terre Haute scenery, and we wanted to give. You know, there are people who've been coming to these shows since day one, right? So to use a well-worn term, they're almost like family. I'm very familiar with these people already. You know, they've taken me under their wing, and vice versa.
There's a great saying, and another promoter told it. He said, "Look, people in life have problems, and people use wrestling as therapy, where they see the same people. All these people know each other. They all get together for a wrestling show, and." You know, wrestlers, especially in local areas, know that somebody's having an issue, or they're going through a bad divorce, or their kid's having a problem. And every other Saturday or once a month, you know, all those problems dissipate, and it's very therapeutic. And I know that a lot of people had that problem because they would go to a show every 2 weeks, and for 6-7 hours during the month, their problems didn't exist. And I would imagine New Wave Pro is like that in a lot of ways, where I'm sure you know that some people in your community are just having a rough time sometimes. And, for, once a month or twice a month, they're now not dealing with their problem. It's not front and center in their mind.
Yeah, 100%. And it was the same for the people who are on the other side of the guardrail, people who are involved in the industry from a working perspective. It's... at the risk of sounding pathetic, it's like my only social circle. I I do a ton of shows for a ton of different companies, and I see a lot of similar faces, a lot of familiar faces, and it's of a comfort to me. And so it was also something, as you rightly identify, not only for the fans and supporters, but for the workers themselves and the staff and concessions and just everybody involved with the show. It was just, the word that got bandied around a lot last year was normality, but in this case, I'll accept it.
Yeah, and I can't wait to go back to normalness. Normality is a good word to throw around, and obviously, when you're running that way, obviously people are starving for content too, beyond just your local community. I mean, I know that because we don't live anymore in a small world. 10 years ago on the indie scene, I don't know how familiar you were with the indie scene. I came into indie wrestling 2017, 2018, so I'm fairly new to the entire indie market. But obviously, you're now placating to the world in a lot of ways. And I'm sure New Wave has a lot more fans from all across the world and in the United States probably as well, in particular because of IWTV. So what is that like because of this? And I know, again, maybe that nobody wanted COVID. I think it's safe to say that. But given that you were running every 2 weeks and you did I think almost 12 to 15 shows in almost 5 months, I think, which is a lot, if not more. I know that from, I think, 2018 to up to this date, I think you did 32 shows, which is ludicrous for an indie company to do. That's a lot in about 2.5, 3 years. That's a lot.
It is stupid when you think about it.
Because I'll explain why it's a lot. It's a lot because indie companies do not have big bankrolls. Very few of them have big bankrolls to make this stuff happen. And even doing 24 shows is a lot. If an indie company does 10 shows a year, that's a lot for an indie promotion. To do anything beyond 10, it's stupidly insane.
Yeah. We actually have a fan in France who reviews our stuff on YouTube. It's in French, so I don't know what he's saying. I think he likes it.
We have loves it or he hates it. It's one or the other. So it's not in the middle.
Well, yeah, he's either reviewing it all the time because he loves it, or he's reviewing it all the time because it's a hate watch. It's a thin line. And we have, I know we have a fan. We have a couple of fans in Germany and Italy, and a couple of people in Russia have hit us up before. So that's a funny feel, and I'd love to be inside their heads when they watch it. But I think that about all fans, be they American, British, Mexican, Japanese, Russian, German, Italian, whatever. I'd love to get inside and get their real unfiltered thoughts about the product we put out, and what they think about it.
Yeah, and IWTV has also been an amazing distribution method for you guys, where obviously it's just global. It's one of the best values in wrestling right now. For I think it's $100 a year, a lot of shows, everything is on there. And what is that like for you? Because obviously your voice is all over. And obviously I think you work for a few other companies that either their stuff eventually gets onto IWTV or gets onto something like High Stream, or there's a few others, I'm sure. But even for you, New Wave, to be part of it, I mean, it's super big. And it was also very helpful probably during the pandemic to get it out there and just get content very accessibly into people's hands very cheaply. Because I know I was starving for content last summer.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I work for New Wave. I commentate for Flophouse Wrestling. I'm ring announcer for AWR, and some other places. And it's funny because at a couple of shows I've been to recently, I've had 2 or 3 people recognize me by my face and say, "Oh, I've seen you on IWTV," which just makes me go, "Okay." I don't know how to respond to that. And I'm sure, I'm just a very small part of things. I'm sure that the people who are the bigger names in the indie scene, who were all over IWTV all the time, tons. Like, your Effie's, your Danhausens, your John Wayne Murdochs and stuff like that. They must be besieged by people sometimes, and I only get a fraction of it. But it's a funny thing. I did a show out in Greenfield, Indiana, which is a very small town. It's a green field, incredibly, and there was a guy there outside the venue making food. He was like a catering service, and I walked up and he went, "Oh, hey, I remember you from IWTV." I was like, "Well, can I have some free food?" But no.
And then even going into this, because I do want to talk a little bit about New Wave, and one of the things that I like about New Wave, and you said it, is that you are having the stars of tomorrow now, is how I view it. And I'm just going to mention a few names, and some of them are a little bit older, some of them are younger, and I think the best one to start with is Cole Radrick.
Mm-hmm.
That guy is everywhere. He's killing it, and obviously he's had so many matches in New Wave, and I feel like he's been one of the ones that, 2019, 2020, and going into 2021, he's been booked, and he's one of the ones that's being brought up, going up against guys like Sage Phillips, Project Monix, Kay Faden, Akira, who I love Akira. Akira's great. Shiloh Greaves, Justin Kyle, who's scary as fuck. That guy is scary as fuck. Okay? And then Mike Bennett, which is a really big name right now. Obviously, Impact, Ring of Honor, I think Mike Bennett was in, and then obviously WWE. So what was that like? Because I don't know how much of a hand you had in that, but obviously bringing him up, and I'm not even touching on half of Cole Radrick.
Yeah, Cole is is a product of the New Wave Academy as well, and he has a long history with the company, long before I ever turned up in this country. And you're right to identify him as a star of tomorrow. He not only puts the work in the ring, but he travels all over the country. Like, on any given day, he's behind the wheel of a car driving about 15 hours somewhere. And it, you mentioned Mike Bennett, and listen, this is a testament to how much he's getting noticed, because the reason Cole Radrick and Mike Bennett happened at New Wave Pro on May 22nd is because Mike Bennett himself went on Twitter and said, "I want to wrestle Cole Radrick." Like, he asked for that. And we were able to supply that match. And if you haven't,
even go off of that, what is that like to have Mike Bennett come in? Because obviously wrestling is a funny business, and I might be entering a little bit of dangerous territory, but people are coming in and out of AEW and WWE, and they're coming in and out of Impact. A lot of Impact wrestling stars can wrestle on the indies, and their contracts are a little bit different. So we could table that sort of. Some of them are exclusive, some of them are not. But what is that like to have former top names coming in that get released and then say, "Hey, I want to wrestle these guys who are coming up, and I want to bring a fight to them," and then your promotion is making it happen, because I immediately recognize the name of Mike Bennett, and Mike Bennett isn't the only one who's a big name who's gone through New Wave Pro, and so it's a very cool thing.
Yeah, Mike Bennett is actually one of the most selfless people I have met in wrestling. He not only effectively requested the match with Cole, he also is a fantastic communicator. He's also just genuinely pleasant. He understands as well that his role, having he's plied his trade at the top and continues to do so. He's traveled the world and competed at the highest level with the biggest wrestling companies in the world, and that doesn't happen by accident.
He understands the concept also of giving back.
Exactly, yeah. That's what I was touching upon, and he knows that he has star power. He knows that he has gravitas, and he also knows he's a fantastic athlete. You may have to shake that last one out of him because he's so modest, but he is. And he came to New Wave Pro. He came to Terre Haute, and he not only put on an absolutely incredible match. Genuinely, it's free. It's available for free on the New Wave Pro YouTube, Bennett versus Radrick. But he also gave a great seminar where he went in depth with people. It wasn't just a case of showing a few moves. He sat down with people, he let them promo, he gave them advice on psychology, character work, promo work, and tailored each response individually, and spent a lot of time with each individual. The seminar must have went on for 4 hours, but it didn't feel like a second was wasted. And even after his match, he'd really gone to the wall in this match. Cole and Bennett went to a 20-minute time limit finish in that match. It was a draw, but it's certainly one of the more exciting matches that New Wave Pros ever put on. And even after the match, he's sitting in the locker room like a prize racehorse. He's got a towel over him. The steam is rising off his body, and he's still willing to give advice to people and watch their videos. And I was amazed by just how much of a team player he is. And you can see there's a certain fire in his eyes. He may feel personally that he wants to go even further than before because he knows he can, and he's getting great matches not only with Cole but with Danhausen, with Effie, with Mysterious Q, and there's a lot more to come from Mike Bennett in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That story has a lot more chapters to be read.
And then obviously talking about another guy who's sort of a veteran like Mike Bennett, and it's Sage Phillips. And I feel like Sage Phillips doesn't get enough credit for what Sage Phillips does. And Sage Phillips has been all over as well. And obviously he's had massive matches against people like Calvin Tinkerman and Miles Morales. Don't Die Miles is who he's known for, and also for the NWP Ultra Rapid title, obviously the Crossroads title. And so what is that like booking him? Because that guy is another one, and I just feel like he is beyond good. And his promos, while they don't make you jump, they are solid. And that guy can promo like so well, and he can wrestle amazingly.
Yeah, funnily enough, the last podcast I did, they brought up Sage as well, and I'll give much the same answer. And I don't mean this to like do him down or disparage him, but Sage is just genuinely one of the most reliable wrestlers you'll meet. He is one of those guys who understands what he needs to do without talking about it too much. He can assess a situation, assess an opponent, and assess a matchup, and know exactly what needs to be done and how to garner the crowd's best reaction possible. He is also, frankly, a master technician in the ring. He is one of those. Yeah, he's one of those wrestlers who does not waste a second of motion. Everything he does has a purpose and it has a justification, and it always builds to something. Going to the very top, I would class in that people who also don't waste a second's motion are people like Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles. Everything they do is there for a reason and builds to something. Every step they take has purpose, and Sage is like that. And you watch
one of the best matches Sage ever had was against Tasha Steele. And the reason why I bring up this match is that it's that technician, but then he's throwing taunts out. And you want to talk about somebody who doesn't waste a second. Those taunts are just as effective as like an arm lock. Mm-hmm. It's the idea that it's just beautifully done on what he did with that. And that's taking not wasting a second to a whole new level when you have that verbal game to it. And the guy is unbelievably good. And that match is from primetime wrestling. I know it's okay. We're all adults in the room here.
Sage can do everything, as you say. He's a great character. He's a mat technician. He's a brawler. He can come off the top. He's fast. He can take it down a notch and bring his opponent down and keep a match slow and keep it to his pace. He's quick with a suplex. The guy can do everything, and he keeps plugging away, and I think it's only a matter of time before he gets the recognition he actually really deserves. And he and I have a good relationship, and I'm always happy to work with him because he is just so easy to communicate with. And frankly, if you need a good job done, then get Sage Phillips.
And then obviously I want to talk about Don't Die Miles. And this is just fun. Okay, everything Don't Die Miles, and I love saying Don't Die Miles. There was like the general manager position versus Shiloh Greaves, and there's just a bunch of stuff. Obviously, there's the Jordan Oliver match, with him. And so even just bringing in Jordan Oliver and all that stuff. So what is it like working with Don't Die Miles? Because that guy is just fun on a stick, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, Miles and I actually, if I may lift the curtain a little bit, he and I have a very close relationship outside of the ring. I've known Miles since my own personal, literal day one in wrestling. My very first training session I turned up to, Miles was there, and I can't even begin. I would have lost count a long time ago as to how many shows we've worked together. Be it in any permutation, me as announcer, commentator, promoter, anything. On average, I think I must see the guy once a week. And Miles has been somebody who I and a lot of others in this scene have watched grow. Everybody loves Miles. Everybody supports Miles. And since the summer of last year, kicking off particularly from his rivalry with Nate Matthews at New Wave Pro, he has just gone from strength to strength to strength, and he is now, a growing face, not just in the Midwest anymore. He's wrestled recently in, Philadelphia, in Washington, D.C., even up in Minnesota. So he is getting that time out on the road, and he's going to all these other promotions and becoming a national face.
And so to even go off of that, because a lot of wrestlers that either come into New Wave Pro and build outward, or come from another promotion and build a big stable. And obviously we're talking about Justin Kyles in a second. I think is another good example of that, where it's this idea that, then they're also wrestling in other places and they're getting out of the Midwest. But in a lot of ways, if you have a history in New Wave Pro and then you go to a company like ICW, like Justin Kyles is, and it is in the pit, you're a representative in many ways. And it shows that, New Wave Pro is a place to be. So what is that like for you, for booking a lot of these people and building out these shows and booking these matches, that, hey, we're taking talent from some places that are not necessarily New Wave Pro originals. They build and they almost become a New Wave Pro original, and then they go out and then they become national brands in a lot of ways, because it must be very cool. And it also must say, hey, we know how to make superstars here.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's funny, I was talking about this yesterday, actually, with a couple of people. New Wave Pro is, in broad terms, in relative terms, we are still sort of low on the totem pole of wrestling. Like, I'm not going to pretend that's a false statement.
But do you think that's good, though, that you're almost the secret sauce in a lot of ways, that nobody's paying attention? Where my entire podcast, I get really big guests and nobody's looking at me, because the second that there's going to be a day the switch flips and it's going to be amazing, it's like, holy fuck, you have all these people, how'd you do it? And so that's how I'm viewing New Wave Pro in many ways. And not to put you on the spot, but that because you said you guys are sort of on the totem pole, but you're producing all these amazing matches. You have great talent coming in, and you're making a lot of superstars, and you're giving a lot of people an opportunity to actually build up their brand. And it's a very cool thing.
Yes, I mean, that honestly has always been my goal as a booker and promoter. It's like, it's like the soccer team who are lower down in the leagues, and they build the young players that the big teams like, your Manchester United, Chelsea's, Liverpool's will buy. And then, as to use your analogy, that will almost make them their own, like homegrown guys. It's a, it's like a hall of mirrors. So, we will build stars. We will build people. We have fantastic production values, and we have good social media as well. In my opinion, better than a lot of our contemporaries at our level. And when we build these guys, the reverse of that is that these guys will go out and they will say, "Well, I got my start. I got my chops at New Wave Pro," and then we will then get in a fresh influx of new talent as well. And Then we have people like Jordan Oliver, like Mike Bennett, like JTG, who we have coming in on July
Hey,
31st.
we're going to talk about that. I
Yeah,
promise.
they will see us and they will go, oh, right, this is the company that's making waves. So you've just got to learn how to manage it properly, because you can either wind up with letting all your good talent disappear and not have enough built up, or you can be left with people who you haven't built up enough because you're too scared of letting people go. If there's one thing you've got to learn in this business, it's sometimes you've just got to let go of something. And if a guy or girl becomes too big or has other ambitions and wants to try something else, then you just got to say thank you very much and then repeat the process. You can't get hung up on this stuff.
Yeah, sometimes you got to know when to cut your losses, and sometimes you got to let people go off on their merry way into the sunset, and
Yeah.
for the next generation. It's an unfortunate thing, and to be completely frank, WWE has figured this out now. It took them a long time, about 15 years of John Cena. It took them, and now they've realized that there's nothing wrong. And sure they want like 15 John Cena types in their company, but they've come to the realization that it's better to have, a 50% player of what John Cena can do, but have 30 of them versus having one of a main star where a company's built around. And because the second that person leaves, and we start with Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and John Cena. So
Yeah, I mean,
obviously,
it's even down to more minor issues such as, this is indie wrestling, so someone could be stuck in work or someone could have car trouble, and if you put all your eggs in one basket and you all hinge it on one guy and they can't turn out, then you're fucked. So.
and then there's two more guys I want to talk about. So obviously, and I might get his name wrong, so I'm sure you're going to correct me, but Solomon Tupu.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so I got that name right, and then one of my favorite wrestlers, Aaron Williams, who is signed and he doesn't care. So unsigned and don't care, along with Gary J. And I don't think you guys have booked Gary yet, but he should be on your list. I am not paid to say that, but I'm sure that Gary will appreciate that when I send this to him. So anyhow, and I think the two of them have went to war. And there's a lot of cool shit. And Aaron Williams is a monster. Solomon is killing it as well. And so what is this like? Because obviously with NWP Higher Ground series and the matches that these guys had and Breaking Ground and all the shows that have gone on, and I think Aaron was brought into the last one, which is how I found New Pro. So what is that like? Because Aaron is a big deal, and he's one of the best kept secrets on the indies right now.
Yes, I 100% agree. Aaron made his New Wave Pro debut, went straight to the top and went against Solomon Tupu for the New Wave Pro Heavyweight Championship. And they had exactly the kind of fantastic match that you would expect them to have. Williams, yes, is what you would call perhaps the best kept secret on the indies. He has quietly plugged away for years. He's a seven-time IWA champion. He is the only two-time back-to-back winner of the Ted Petty Invitational. Again, people like that don't have those accolades by accident. It's not a joke. It doesn't just happen. It happens for a reason.
Aaron was running the roads with John Moxley and Rockstar.
And we
that has legitimately done everything. And he's also become a jockey exhibitionist, but that's a different discussion.
Well, he's coming back to New Wave Pro on July 31st. He faces Freddie Hudson in a match that a lot of people seem very excited about. And for good reason. These two will go at it. We're happy to bring Aaron into New Wave for a second time, and I don't doubt there is more. In terms of Gary J, I'll just say that keep your eyes open because something may be coming down the pipe very soon.
He's just another one that has done it all. Mm-hmm. And I'm not putting you on the spot. I mean, he's killing it, and he's just like Aaron Williams in so many ways. And they've started basically the not signed and don't care club. And I think both those guys have no desire to be signed in any which way, and they just want to wrestle, and they're monsters, and they've been working at it forever. And so it's very cool in that regard. And so obviously, talking about that because we're sort of on it, obviously Aaron Williams is facing, as you stated, I think he's facing Freddie Hudson. And so that's sort of one of the matches that's coming up. I obviously put up the banner. And so it's Mob Rules. So what is the deal with Mob Rules before we dive too much into it?
In what way?
When is Mob Rules taking place? How can people find it? And like, obviously, what is it like booking this? Because obviously, this is a pretty stacked card. I think there's only 3 or 4 matches have been announced so far, and like it's already pretty stacked.
Yep, so Saturday, July 31st at the Terre Haute National Guard Armory, New Wave Pro Mob Rules already confirmed. Solomon Tupu versus Cole Radrick for the New Wave Pro Championship.
There we go. We're going to talk about that one too. But
yeah, we have, as we've already said, Aaron Williams versus Freddie Hudson. We have also confirmed Mad Dog Connolly against Hardway Heater, which is just going to be those two just trying to pull each other's heads off, basically.
I'm sure we're going to dive into it a little bit more in a second here, but yeah, and then also JTG is supposed to show up.
Yes, that's right. JTG will be there as well. It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens with him. And just today, we have confirmed that there will be a tag team turmoil match for the New Wave Pro Tag Team Championships. So the current reigning tag team champions, the Tart Foundation, Aaron Atlas and Matt Brannigan, defending the belts in a turmoil match, which is effectively a tag team gauntlet. We are going to great lengths to try and revamp our tag team division, and we are looking at. Well, we're going to be confirming some interesting teams for this one. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's called Mob Rules because there's going to be a lot going on. There's going to be a lot of violence, a lot of mob warfare, a lot of people involved, lots of affiliations, lots of people taking sides and turning on one another. So, it's chaos, and certainly after right here, right now, a lot of stuff was up in the air. In terms of like the finishes to matches and where we're headed with certain people, and this is just another continuation of a set of great stories. We have a good idea of where things are headed up until next January, next March even. It's an exciting time to be a part of this company.
So I do want to talk a little bit about this, though, about sort of what I think is going to be the grand marquee match here, and that's this one, which is Solomon Tupu versus Cole Radrick. And obviously, I think it is a titles match, I'm assuming. And so what is this like, where you have, obviously Solomon's killing it right now. He's coming off of this great match with Aaron Williams. They went to war with each other, and then, Cole is now stepping up, and he's going pretty hard, and Cole is obviously everywhere and has been killing it. And so what is it like to book this banger of a match? Because this looks really fucking good on paper. And I mean, and it's going to live up to it in a lot of ways, because you're putting Cole Radrick in anything. Cole Radrick can wrestle a broom, and it'll be very, very exciting.
Well, that's going to be next month's main event, Cole Radrick versus a broom. So you've ruined that now. No, this is simply a contest between two of New Wave Pro's biggest and best stars. It is a New Wave Pro dream match, I would argue. You have the long time, face of New Wave Pro, Cole Radrick, against this powerful monster champion in Solomon. And, this is a match, and I've said this from day one, since we confirmed it, well before we put the announcement out. I said this is a match that in 2 years' time, another company bigger than New Wave Pro will do, right? Because those two will rise and rise and rise and rise. And it is a match another company will do in 2-3 years' time, and we will say, no, we did it first, and it was great. And that's what we're in the business of doing. Just calling back to what we were talking about, setting up the stars of tomorrow, and we're setting up the matches of tomorrow. And this is exciting, man. When we put the announcement out, people looked at it and went, "That is a match I didn't know I needed in my life," you know. And I honestly can't wait. Cole, the only belt Cole hasn't won in New Wave Pro is that championship, and Solomon has held the belt now for about 7.5 months, and he's been a very dominant champion. He's put down Conan Lycan and Ace Perry and Aaron Williams, and now he wants a scalp. You know, if he can claim a victory over Cole Radrick, then the sky's the limit for Solomon. And Cole will want to, in front of a crowd which has watched him grow and develop for years, capture that big title. So there's so many things going into it that are really exciting, aside from the physicality of the match itself.
Yeah, that's something that I feel in a lot of ways wrestling is lacking, which is a big fight feel, stories, the idea of a dream match, also the idea of different styles, because obviously Solomon is a much larger guy than Cole. And he's, I say this and it's probably not politically correct, but Solomon's a little bit more beefier than Cole. And so obviously we have a very interesting style and we have an interesting matchup that's about to happen, not to mention that sort of the belt that Cole needs to complete. And while Solomon has been running the gauntlet for a while, and so obviously where that story ends, it's either that, it's really capturing, I guess, being verified by either one of these guys. And so it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, the title has a lot of prestige, honestly. And Solomon has only grown that prestige by taking down some very worthwhile opponents. And I think regardless of the results, it's a title that a lot of people, that everyone in Indiana is going to want, certainly, and in the surrounding states. They're going to see just the caliber of people who are fighting for this championship, and they'll know it means something. So regardless of if Solomon retains or if Cole takes the win, either way, the prestige of the belt can only grow.
And then obviously this is sort of the match that's going to be the main event, but I do want to talk about this match too. It's just going to be a war.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a violent match. And I'm pretty sure that, I don't know the exact rules in New Wave Pro here, but I have a feeling that the ref is going to let anything go for the most part in this type of match, because these two, I don't think they really care about being DQ'd. And I have a feeling that it's mob rules. So DQs may not exist in this match.
Well, we'll have to see how things turn out. But you're right to denote that, Heater and Connolly are just simply out to hurt each other. Connolly has been at New Wave a couple of times now. He recently defeated Arthur MacArthur in quite a huge brawl. Heater's actually making his New Wave Pro debut, and this will be a really big chance to catch everyone's eye. But I think, at the risk of sounding trite, I think regardless of who wins this match, it's a positive for the fans and the viewers, because that's a premium fight you're giving people. And I use the word fight as opposed to match, because there's a difference.
Yeah, this is not, meant to, I don't think that these guys are looking for like a quick roll up. I mean, it's going to be a knockout type or a big power bomb type finisher, or and I don't think this is going to end in a submission either.
I think it's going to be a stand-up brawl. It's going to wind its way around the ringside area, and it's probably going to get up close and personal to people, and you're going to hear and see everything. And these two, look, I know they want to fight each other. When the match was announced, they were both extremely excited, a little too excited to hurt each other, but that's their problem, not mine.
Hey, as long as we're not on commentary and they don't come near you, I'm good.
Yeah, I'll be watching from the back on the monitor. Don't worry.
I'll be perfectly fine. I got my iPad set up. It'll all be good. And obviously even going further, because I always like when matches go around ringside. I like when matches go into the crowd. I've only been to a show where that happened once, so I've only experienced that entire thing once. But I enjoy watching those matches. I also like the fact that when a ring announcer, and there's a very funny ring thing that happened in ICW that I think is hilarious still, where a match got out of hand, and people legitimately had to be told to move out of the way. And so that's what this match seems like. And then obviously Aaron Williams and Freddie Hudson are going to kill it. And then we've got KPG and we got some tag team stuff. And I think, what is there, like 4 or 5 matches that have to still be announced?
Yes, around that. There's still some surprises on the way. Trust me.
And so obviously I'm not going to push too hard on this. I'm sure that you can technically tell us all, but you're going to harbor it, and I completely understand why, because there's a lot of stuff. And I mean, New Wave Pro has a huge bullpen to pull from. I mean, you could go Sam Knight, you could go, I think, Jason Levy. I think, there's a few other names that I could drop here. Obviously, Sage Phillips can always show up. Don't Die Miles. It could be on the card. Obviously, I think it's Jay Olander might be able to come. I'm not too sure if Shiloh Greaves is allowed in the company anymore after several matches might have gone a certain way. I know your history. What can I say as a company? I spent hours on Cage Match, so I know everything.
Good. I think you know more than I do. No, you're right to identify. There's a lot of names and a lot of history associated with this company, and just keep your eyes on the social media.
Justin Kyles can come about because I don't think he has any bookings on July 31st. So I'm just saying that
I would just encourage people to buy a ticket for the Armory on July 31st, because you never know what's going to happen. Certainly at New Wave, it's a very unpredictable environment at the moment, and that's what makes it such like must-see wrestling.
And then obviously the other question is that, and I actually don't know, because I know that New Wave stuff does get up onto IWTV, but I don't know if you guys are ready and up to date on live streaming yet, or is it that it comes out like a month later for people to consume? Because obviously I live in Connecticut, so I'm not driving to Indiana. As much as I love New Wave now and everything that I'm seeing, I'm not about to go on a 17-hour car ride up to Indiana so quickly. so quickly. So
yeah, well, we pride ourselves honestly on we have a fantastic production team, a gentleman known as Prophet of Ash. He is the cameraman, one of the camera people, and is the editor of our shows as well. And he has very, very quick turnaround times. For example, right here, right now, because of the buzz around it, it was on IWTV in less than 24 hours. And we pride ourselves on how quickly we get things turned around, because we understand. I know there are companies who either aren't that bothered about how much time it takes, or simply get caught up in their own processes, which is not a bad thing, just sometimes it happens. But one of our key priorities, one of the main things we look to do, is get that show online ASAP, or else the consumer interest just withers and dies, and then all of a sudden all the air has gone from the balloon and you're left with an empty balloon.
Yeah, I agree. And so obviously I'm looking forward to catching it in the first week of August.
Yeah, I hope Mob Rules should be available by at latest August 2nd or 3rd.
So obviously, I'm looking forward to that, because the world is a very big place. And obviously I don't know how many tickets are there, and obviously I'm in Connecticut, and I'm pretty sure there's somebody in California, and my audience is from all over the world. So I'm sure that, if somebody who's watching and that guy in France, he's probably not flying in to Indiana so quickly. But you never know. He might show up and be like, he might just start speaking French to you and say,
yeah, I was going to say, suddenly I could hear someone say, bonjour, monsieur, ça va? And I'll be like, oh, shit, it's you. Hello.
So on that note, obviously we've been speaking for a while, and I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote yourself. Obviously, I know you have a Twitter. I know that you're doing a bunch of stuff. Obviously, Mob Rules is the big one. I don't know where else you're commentating or doing ring announcing for that you could talk about. But where can people find you? Where can people find New Wave Pro? Obviously, where can people support New Wave Pro, support you, support the variety of companies you work for? And obviously, I kind of want to give you that platform.
Okay, cool. Yeah. For me personally, I'm on Twitter at the Liverpool Lip. I'm also on Facebook as Earl Joseph. Lots of updates there. I'm always keeping people, in touch with the shows I'm working for. As well as New Wave Pro, I work for AWR in Indianapolis. I work for Flophouse Wrestling in Indianapolis. I work for Pro Wrestling Trainwreck in now Indianapolis as well. That's a deathmatch company run by the son of Ian Rotten. I am going to start working for a company called Pro Wrestling Kapow down in Tennessee. So I'm going to make my Tennessee debut on August 7th. In terms of New Wave Pro, you can find them on Twitter at newwave_pro. They're on Instagram at New Wave Pro, and just put New Wave Pro into Facebook, you'll find it. Obviously, we have Mob Rules, Saturday, 31st of July. We have JTG coming, formerly of Crime Time in WWE. We've got Solomon Tupu versus Cole Radrick, Aaron Williams versus Freddie Hudson, Hardway Heater versus Mad Dog Connolly, and as confirmed today, a tag team Turmoil match. And we have a ton more announcements to make about that show. So just, if you follow us on social media, just keep an eye out for it. Find us on IWTV. I would genuinely, honestly, and I don't just say this out of bias, but I would genuinely recommend that you pick up the thread from Higher Ground episode 1 on July 26th, 2020, and follow it all the way through, because all of the shows are linked in some way. There is a continuous thread, and we're coming up to a year now since we started these stories, and we're really seeing the fruits of them develop. Buy the merchandise, I suppose.
Yeah, and so I've been saying this all along. You have to support indie wrestling and indie content creators. And the best way how to do that is obviously with wrestling and indie wrestling. Pick up an IWTV subscription. It does make a huge difference. Actually watch these promotions, whether you're watching it live, you're watching it on replay. That helps. Tweet about it. That's a big one. Tweeting about things is free. Obviously, if wrestlers, commentators, referees, ring announcers have merchandise, pick up their merchandise. That is super, super important. And obviously, if you want to support me, I'm going to throw my name in there. You can buy me a coffee. Links up above. I absolutely appreciate everybody who does that. But more importantly, as I was stating, you have to share content, and I get that people economically are in a rough position. I am the first person who understands that everybody's been there, and COVID has done a lot of damage to people. So if you are in that rough position and you can't, buy somebody's t-shirt or an 8x10 or throw them a few dollars on their Patreon or even a promotion, please take care of yourself first and foremost. And if you're in that position, you should be following them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Obviously, you should be liking this podcast, sharing this podcast. It goes a long way. And it does make a difference. Shoot, your favorite wrestler a message on Facebook or Twitter if their DMs are open, or if you find an email, say, hey, I really enjoy the match you just had, because obviously when people shoot me messages, it makes me feel good as well. It also tells me that feedback is important. It tells me I'm doing something right. So on that note, obviously, social media is free, so follow all your wrestlers and people in wrestling who you appreciate, and actually comment on their stuff and retweet their stuff and comment on stuff. It does make a difference. Whether you're watching it live or not live, it makes a big difference. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Oh, shit.
Well, we could end right there. I mean, it's totally cool.
Yeah, I think
I'm the one who screwed your name in the beginning, so clearly, if anybody should be saying, "Oh shit, it's me."
No, thank you for your time, Andrew. It's been a very engaging interview, and I thank you for your not only your questions but the depth of your research as well. It's been very welcome. I'll be sure to put out the word to follow and watch this podcast and others. But for now, I would simply say,
you could just go like, I hope Chelsea wins.
no, we
Go,
won't.
go, go.
I don't know. You've caught me on the hop. I've said I've spent nearly 90 minutes talking, and now I don't know what to say. So I think that's a good time to leave it.
Well, half the time I don't know what to say either, so it's all right. I guess you're in the same company, and therefore, just everybody go watch Mob Rules when it comes out on IWTV.
There you go. That's what I meant to say.
And on that note, it's a wrap.